Hello and welcome to podcast 42 from Football Dania, your home of Dutch football. I'm Michael Statham and I'm with James Rowe and Michael Bell to discuss the latest Dutch football news, including the Netherlands' progress to the semi-finals of the Nations League and the latest Eredivisie news, including the title race between PSV and Ajax and new financial arrangements which could change the future of the Eredivisie. You can listen to us on YouTube, SoundCloud and iTunes, and our new home on Australian radio show Football Nation Radio. We hope you enjoy. James, Mike, good to have you here. We should start by talking about the Nations League semi-finals. So the Dutch have reached the last four of the competition, having got through a group containing France and Germany. That's the big news. It's fantastic for Dutch football, and it just shows the progress that Ronald Koeman and his players have made since he took over only at the start of this year. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on how they played against France and Germany and how much progress these two games have shown from the Dutch national team.
I think as fans, the Dutch national team have seen for the past 3 years how horrible it's really been since the 2014 World Cup. It's been quite a downer watching it, but these past two international breaks have been fantastic to see, and the Dutch national team's really full of confidence in it. It's great to see, and we're back amongst the best nations in the world, and we can compete against them, beating France quite comfortably, beating Germany quite comfortably. You've got so many new talents coming through. It just seems also positive at the moment. Ronald Koeman deserves huge credit for what he's done. He's turned basically everything around, and you go into these international breaks looking forward to seeing Netherlands now, which probably wasn't the case at this time last year. And who's to say that we can't win this Nations League in the Final Four? I think it's going to be very, very open. And then we go into the Euro 2020 qualifiers full of confidence. And then, this side's more than capable of getting back to a major tournament and competing for titles again.
I agree. I think Mike makes a great point about what the fans have had to go through with missing the last two major tournaments, and to get through to a Nations League semi-final in a very, very difficult group, playing so well, especially at home to Germany, and the climax in Gelsenkirchen as well, when they were down and it wasn't looking possible, and they fought back in the way they did. I thought the result against France was very telling. I thought the atmosphere played a massive role. In the past, we've often spoken here about changing the stadium to ensure a better atmosphere, and I think the change to Rotterdam de Kuip has really brought that to the fore and really helped. But my personal opinion is I take nothing away from the Netherlands in terms of how they played, and they fully deserve all the plaudits they get. But my own personal opinion is watching that game against France in Rotterdam, when I looked at the body language of Mbappe and Griezmann, it looked as if they didn't really want to be there. And I looked at the fixtures of the Nations League. You have three Nations League matches condensed into 4 to 5 weeks now, whereas before there was a fair long gap between club football commitments and then national team duty. And I think when that's condensed into such a small amount of time, that I think that can grate on the players a little bit personally. I mean, if you've got club commitments of Champions League football, domestic football, and then you've got condensed Nations League games on top of that, I think that can play a part. I think France as well, they missed Lucas Hernandez. I think they missed Pogba. And I got the impression that they didn't really want to be there. I mean, they started their World Cup. They won the World Cup and they were the best team at the tournament, in my personal opinion. And then after that, you carry the tag of being world champions. I don't think it's weighing too heavily already, but I just think so many games condensed into a small amount of time for the majority of those players. I think I got the impression that they would have rather been somewhere else, to be honest.
Over the course of the season, I guess these games will take their toll, including on the Dutch national team players. But from our point of view, looking in and watching these exciting matches, I think it's great that we've got to have these competitive matches against France and Germany, and it actually means something. For me, in my opinion, I think that these extra fixtures are great from a fan's point of view, and that's ultimately what it's all about. Yes, it must be more tiring for the players, but didn't we all have fun in that international break? And Ronald Koeman's turned this around in 10 games. That is the key part for me, that he's turned it around so quickly. And that brings me on to the questions that we've had in. And thank you very much, everybody that sent in the questions this week. Abdul asks, we're witnessing a new dawn of Oranje that many of us did not see coming. Why did it happen so suddenly when many of us were hopeless a few months ago? So that brings me to my point again, where I said at the start of the 2018, Ronald Koeman's come in. So how has he swept this and changed the fortunes around so much? We're in the final four of the Nations League. Like, this is a huge achievement.
I think he's been helped by, the influx of players that are coming through, and also just a change of tactics around certain things. I think at the start of his reign, he started again with a 5-3-2. It didn't really work. He's gone back to a 4-3-3, but that's because he's got the players now to play it. You've got Frenkie de Jong coming through, who's been magnificent, and I think he controlled the game against France. From the midfield, players like Conte just couldn't deal with him, and he's probably the biggest Dutch talent around at the moment. Then you've got Memphis up front. Moving him through the middle has just been a sensation as well. Leon do it now, and Koeman's copied that, and you see him when he pulls on a Netherlands shirt. He's just so happy to be there, and he's so energized whenever he's on the pitch. And these players are taking the game to another level under Koeman that they didn't have under Advocaat or Blind.
I think to add on to Mike's point there about at the end with regards to Advocaat and Blind, we've now got a national team manager who's so determined to succeed, but more importantly has experience of moulding a competitive team at club level, and that is proving to be very successful. I mean, if you think of Koeman's experience not just with foreign clubs, but with Ajax, Feyenoord, PSV, also his stint at AZ, knowing the Dutch psyche as well and wanting to succeed. I think he had his fingers burnt with the disappointments at Everton and Southampton, and he's so determined, and I think he's enjoying the role and he's enjoying the job. I mean, when he was first announced as national team manager, somebody asked him in his press conference, "You're not going to walk away from us, are you, if a big club comes in?" He said, "No." He said, "I'm here until 2022, and I'm here to see this out and make us a competitive nation again." And he's true to his word. I think it's brilliant the way he can identify. In the case of Denzel Dumfries, he's had such a rapid rise, but he doesn't look out of place at international level, and that's a massive help. The talents like De Jong and De Ligt coming into their own and enjoying international level, and this was always going to be a long road. I think we're slightly ahead of where everybody thought we were going to be, especially in terms of final four of the Nations League and beating the last two reigning world champions. But there's still a long way to go. Mike made a very good point in a previous pod a couple of months ago, I believe, that the striker's role needs to be refined, and I think that's a good point as well, because I think that will come into play in the final four and maybe the final itself. Yes, Memphis is on a massive, he's riding a massive crest for a wave, but to have other options as well, that could be the difference between winning the Nations League and not winning the Nations League. But they can go to Portugal next summer with an awful lot of confidence, and they will, because they deserve to be there as much as the other three nations, and there's no reason why they can't win this Nations League.
It was good to see that Koeman had options from the bench as well, which has not been the case. I think Tony Vilhena came off against Germany, totally changed the game, and even Luuk de Jong coming on, the striker role is a problem, but having somebody that can come up and just win battles in the air, and him alongside Virgil van Dijk at the end was some great tactics that came along from that note from the assistant coach. And you see Luuk de Jong right now, he's playing with so much confidence for PSV that he even scored an overhead kick at the weekend. This was spectacular, and it's nice to see that it's not just the starting 11 that we've got and there's not really anyone else. There's options all over the place at the moment.
Yeah, a really great recap from both of you there about what the strengths have been over these last few months and the progress that's been made by Koeman and the players. And none more so, in my opinion, than Koeman's tactics. I think that's been a big help as well, in the way they play and the confidence that he has in his players to play certain roles. He came in and started with 5 at the back, and that's now developed back into the old 4-3-3, but with a lot more fluidity with the way players will play their roles. Such as Frank de Jong, he's playing in the middle of the park, but he does drop back in to make a back five, and that still holds that solid structure then at the back, and if they get caught on the counter-attack, there's always players back for that situation. And I think that maturity from Koeman over the likes of Advocaat, Blind before, which were very stuck in their ways with the 4-3-3 and the way it had to be done, but Koeman said, no, it doesn't have to be done this way. We've got the players to play these formations. These are the team's strengths. Let's play to them. Let's stick to them. And that's, for me, the main reason why we've had this success. Although, yeah, it has really helped having these young players come through and really excel at this level already. And another question we had in asked, which lessons should the Dutch learn from this game with Germany? And that's a good question, because even though the Dutch got their result against Germany, a 2-2 draw, and on the face of it, a draw away in Germany is a great result for the Dutch. But having seen how the Germans have performed over the last year or so, on all levels, friendlies and the World Cup, really didn't the Dutch have a poor first hour to the game? I just wonder what you guys thought about that match, and what can we take from that in a positive and negative side?
The positive will be that they was able to fight back and fight until the end, and I think it will stand them in good stead to start matches quicker at this level. I think it will help the team season out and gain more confidence as time goes on. You saw the pace of Leroy Sané, and the pace and the trickery was sometimes a bit difficult for the defenders to deal with, so that there needs to be a bit more aware of that. I think going back to 4-3-3 will help, being able to play in different formations also. You know, this is all relative, but you know, when you've got Koeman not just as his managerial career but also playing career, when you compare that to Danny Blind, for example, it's chalk and cheese, and you know, the Dutch FA have now made this appointment back in February. Okay, 4 years too late, but better late than never. And I think Koeman's experience at club level as a manager, and even the little things, I mean, you saw his facial expression when they were down against Germany and not looking as if they were going to react, that he had a face like thunder and wanting to put things right. And I think as time goes on, you'll see more and more of a cohesive unit. But I think they've got to learn going forward at international level, maybe to start games, especially away from home, just that little bit quicker in the first half, for example.
I also think, you know, one of the big lessons you learn from that is sometimes don't change a winning team just for the sake of it. I think we can all say Denzel Dumfries was excellent against France, and it just came as a shock when he was dropped for Kenny Tete, who was horrific in the first hour, and he got torn apart time after time by Leroy Sané. Even having him next to De Ligt, it seemed to put him off as well, and he had an error-prone first half hour. You know, like something like as crucial as the defence that was so strong against France. You know, why change it just for the sake of it and putting somebody that's not even playing?
I must interrupt just here, because were a couple of players not only dropped because of injuries and fitness? I thought Dumfries was dropped for Tete because of a small injury he picked up, but I can't say for sure.
That's what we. The rumour over here was, especially afterwards, news filtered out that he was injured. But as I say, he's on course to nail that right back spot down for many years to come. I mean, even when Daniel Janmaat is fully fit and playing for Watford, I think you've got a case to think Dumfries over him, and that says a massive statement for a player of only 22 years of age.
So I read it as Bergwijn was injured, and Koeman decided to change it because he wanted to try a different combination on the right. So he took both of them out.
And I agree. Yeah, and that came as a surprise to me when I saw it too, and I could only have assumed that was the case, because they played so well together, Dumfries and Bergwijn on the right wing. But perhaps that link up instead with having Tato in there, yeah, but he didn't have the best game. And I agree with you, Mike. De Ligt wasn't that as confident, and he did not have his best game that evening. I think he could have been a lot closer to the German strikers, but it did show that he had a a slight lack in pace, and Werner was able to take advantage of that on a few.
I think it improved in the second half defensively. It's just the first half hour, and I think that's been one of the problems for Koeman so far. Is in some games they seem to start very slowly. The away game against France, the whole match against Chile, and there's a couple of hours where they found themselves down within the opening 20 minutes. And it's something that Koeman probably needs to look at going into, the more important Euro 2020 qualifiers.
Okay, well, James, Mike, is there any last points you want to mention about the Dutch national team in this international break?
I just think it's great that we can see a country that's held in such high regard still, even after missing 2 major tournaments by many of their fellow nations, and also their what they've achieved in the past. And it's nice to see green shoots coming after such a spell in the doldrums. There's still a bit of a way to go, but I think this will culminate in the Netherlands quite potentially winning the Nations League. For me, it depends on who they draw in that semi-final. But more so than that, I think this is the base has been set now for them to go on to have hopefully a very good qualifying campaign, and hopefully this will culminate in a very positive Euro 2020 international tournament and a return to a major tournament on an international stage.
Yeah, I think it's just great to watch this national side. I mean, I think a year ago when the draw was made, I don't think any of us would have said that Netherlands would have won this group, and that's what's happened. I think it annoys me to think that some of the nations might not be taking it seriously, because I hear that a lot from our podcasts. Might say that the Belgiums, the Spains, the Frances might not have taken this competition very seriously. That's easy to say because they didn't get through. I think England are taking it very seriously now that they're into the final 4. I think Switzerland, Portugal, and now Netherlands, they'll all be saying it's a great tournament. I think in hindsight, it's a bit disrespectful to say that some of these top nations didn't try or didn't want to go far in the competition because it didn't really matter to them. I think if they got through, then you'd see that they'll all be trying to win the trophy and make history as the first one to ever win it.
Too right, and I think the perfect case for that is Germany, because after such a torrid World Cup, you think they want to come back with a vengeance, but that wasn't the case, and they were embarrassed by the French and the Dutch. Okay, a final point on Frenkie de Jong then. So he's had a fantastic international break. Just wanted to get your guys' opinion on where you think he might be in a year's time and just how good he is.
For me, he's a sensational talent and one that we've not seen coming through the Netherlands for years. I think he plays a brand of football that is so fearless. Just a brand of football you don't really see on a pitch these days. Clubs don't like to take risks. Managers don't like to take risks. And you read articles about Frenkie de Jong, and he was told when he was younger by the Willem II coach Jurgen Streppel to stop dribbling so much, and Frenkie would just ignore it. And you can't take that away from him because he's such a talent who relies on his dribbling, his ability to just breeze past players at will and open up space for others. You saw players like Wijnaldum saying that he loves playing with him. He's got so many plaudits over the past international week. The Telegraph saying that after Cruyff we have Frenkie, and he's a generational talent and one that's the price tag keeps going up and up on. And I think in a year's time they're going to have a scramble for his signature. I think if he goes further in the Champions League and goes far in the Nations League, then you're going to have every single big club in Europe wanting him. Me personally, I hope he goes somewhere where he can develop as a player, whether that's under Pep Guardiola. If he gets guarantees over playing time, that might work for him. And Manchester City might be a very good option for him if they want a replacement for Fernandinho. Bayern Munich as well. I think there's a couple of clubs around Europe that are going to go for a big change in the summer. I think Real Madrid's one of them, and they might see Frenkie as the next Galactico if they were willing to pay an extreme amount for him. I hope he doesn't pick PSG because I think I wouldn't want him there. But I think any other big club would be a good option for him.
Having watched him since he broke through and watched him firsthand and watched him grow, to be in the position he's in now at the age of 21 and to have such a presence at club level, European level and international level. As Mike says, it's a once in a generational talent. And his attitude as well, he always plays with a smile on his face. Doesn't matter what, whether if he's playing at home to Emmen, if he's playing away to in Europe, if he's playing in the Nations League, you know, he's always playing with a smile on his face, and always so mature, and I think can enjoy the advice of his fellow pros. For me, I just hope he goes somewhere where he's going to play all the time. I don't want him to be stunted with a manager filling his head with all tactical jargon. Just let him play. My prediction is that Barcelona are going to push very, very hard for him, and I think he may well end up there. But if you said to me where would I rather see him go, I would rather see him go to Bayern Munich, because I think they'd look after him. I think Bayern Munich's play in the position Bayern are in at the minute, they need a playmaker going forward in the middle of the pitch to dictate. And I think if Bayern was to secure his services, I think that could be a masterstroke.
So we all agree that he's a marvellous player and he's going to go very far. But a huge question for you both is he going to be as good as Cruyff? Is he going to be as influential?
No, because you're talking about someone that transcends football. You know, that's exactly what Johan Cruyff did. He transcended football. You know, I mean, you know, he just changed the way people thought about people. People looked at football. You know, you look at what he changed, not just here in Amsterdam, but also with Ajax as well. I mean, you could talk about him for hours, but I think, you know, Frenkie de Jong is a generational, once in a generation talent. He needs to continue to be nurtured, and he certainly must not be curtailed by any manager he receives in future, because let him naturally play his game and we will all see the benefit of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with James. I think Cruyff, he didn't just change Dutch football, he changed Netherlands as a whole, as a country at the time it was. When he broke through, he took the nation by the scruff of the neck, and I don't think you're going to ever see somebody do that again. I think play-wise, he's going to transform this Dutch national team at the moment. You've seen it for a bit already. He's one of the main reasons for me that Netherlands won the Nations League group, the way he dominates the midfield. I think that's great going into the big tournaments that are going to be ahead. I think when you look ahead to Euro 2020, you know, if people wanted to say who's going to be the stars of the tournament now, you'd circle his name as being one of the potential big names of that tournament. And he's just a joy to watch. I think if you've never seen him in action, you know, watch him, because he does stuff on a pitch that you just don't see in many other games from many other players.
Now we must move on to the Eredivisie, and there's a big talking point in this last week about how the Netherlands as a whole was changing the way that the money would be distributed amongst the league's clubs. Jordan is wondering what we thought about the money being distributed by the big three clubs, Ajax, PSV, Feyenoord, amongst the rest of the Eredivisie. He just wondered what we thought about it, and is it going to be a positive? Is this the way forward for the Netherlands? Is this the only way forward?
I think this change is positive when you look at this season. You know, Ajax and PSV they're far too good for the rest of the teams in it at the moment. You know, there's competitive games below them, but when it comes to, you know, Ajax against the lesser sides like Emmen, NEC Breda, like they played yesterday, like they park the bus and try and frustrate them. It's not, you know, that great a preparation for a big Champions League game when you're just like controlling games so easily. And something had to change, and you want to see these teams being able to compete with the top two. And this is the only way it's going to happen. I think the Eredivisie as a whole could have gone further. I think the big teams will probably be a bit disappointed that there was resistance to changing artificial pitches. There's 2 or 3 clubs that would just not agree to it, and they're going to be the ones that miss out on the distribution of money because they're just refusing to help out in that regard. And that's frustrating, because I think you know, the Eredivisie can get back to being a competitive league, but it's not going to be up there with the top 5 unless certain things change, and one of them is the pitches. And it's annoying that some of the clubs just can't see that.
Some of the clubs, to elaborate on that, Mike, some of the clubs themselves, they're so careful in terms of budgets, so careful in terms of forward thinking, in terms of making sure that there's enough money to pay for certain things, and the fact that they're supervised by the Dutch FA. Some can be far too cautious, which leads to situations like this, like a resistance, in terms of as silly as it might sound, the upkeep of a natural grass pitch, all weather scenarios, these kinds of things. You know, some are a little bit too overcautious in terms of the contractual obligations that they have to fulfil, and it, you know, like you say, I fully agree with you. You know, to show resistance is a bit of a shame, but I can understand in some cases the reasons why. But you would hope that this is a good start, and yeah, fingers crossed. As I say, it's not the only thing that they can do, and I'm sure they'll look to do more piece by piece. But obviously, it's not going to happen overnight.
Ultimately, as a whole, you're looking at having to strengthen the top teams in the league in order to strengthen the whole league, because you want the top teams in the Netherlands to be competing well in European competitions. Everything filters down. However, at the moment, you've kind of got this imbalance of the top two teams being far too good for the rest, and the rest teams getting a little bit weaker. Hence the money change, where the lower teams can earn some of this benefits that the top teams are getting. But you have to look at the bigger picture, and the top Dutch teams do need this success in Europe ultimately, and whatever the Netherlands can do to support that is important, because, as I say, the bigger picture, these top clubs are the ones that own the best Dutch players for the Dutch national team. You're seeing now De Jong, De Ligt, Dumfries, Bergwijn as just 4 examples of players that are benefiting from this extended period of the Dutch teams in the Champions League. That might happen over winter too for Ajax. That keeps those players in the Netherlands developing longer. That's important. And if this brings me on to a comment from someone on Twitter, Vim, he said, after 10 years of good clashes of winning the Eredivisie, poor performances in Europe, we finally have a good Champions League being played by Dutch teams. But it looks like the price is to pay is to have all the Eredivisie matches given for granted, as we were mentioning, as Mike said, Ajax playing Emmen, NAC Breda, and just having easy run-outs. So he wonders, how can we solve this problem without losing our interest in the Eredivisie? And I think one of the things that we had already is, yes, you've got the teams at the top getting stronger and winning easily, but the money will be filtered down. So and amongst these changes too was the relegation, about having 2 automatic relegation places and only 1 for playoffs, but that hasn't been certified yet. That's more of a talking point. But what, you know, is this ultimately going to work out? Do you think this plan is gonna help the league get stronger? The aim by the Eredivisie is to have the Dutch league become one of the top 8 leagues in Europe. It's currently sitting in 12th. We're looking to finish 11th this season to get an automatic Champions League place back. But top 8 is ultimately the aim. Is this realistic with a plan in place?
Yeah, but not in the short term. I think to go from 12 to top 8 overnight would be very difficult. I think it's very good the way they are looking at the relegation situation, because when you try to explain that to other people, it breaks their head, and you see how giving second chances in the relegation playoffs leads to a club staying in, or can lead to a club not going up from what is now the Keukenkampioen division, where that has it can be detriment to their budget for the following season. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I can understand the tweet, and I can understand always respect the opinion of tweets that we receive, but it's not as bad as what, in terms of, I mean, if you look at Europe for the moment, Ajax are on course to qualify for the last 16. They reached the Europa League final not so long ago. PSV put the frighteners up Atletico and took them to penalties in the Champions League. So it's not a completely lost cause. But I just think it's good to be innovative. It's good to look at different things. But I think to have a bit of a jump from 12 to 8 in the short term is a little bit too ambitious, but I think if you look at the long term, then it's definitely feasible. Yes.
Long term, something needs to change, because you look at Ajax; they're doing great in Europe this season. They're kind of carrying the Netherlands probably to 11th spot in the automatic place. I think if they qualify from the group, it's basically confirmed. But you know, these players like Frankie de Jong, De Ligt, Hakim Ziyech, they're behind Ajax success and getting somebody like Dusan Tadic. If the league doesn't improve and the teams below, you know, PSV and Feyenoord don't start showing more resistance, you know, these players aren't going to want to stay at Ajax in the long term, and that's what's going to have to happen for the league to get into the top 8. You don't have to be able to maintain these players, and these players are going to have to come up against something that's not just you know, like a brick wall just sitting in front of defence and trying to frustrate them the whole time. Because somebody like Frankie de Jong, he's going to eventually want to play against the best in the world. He's not going to get that against, you know, the Nac Bredas, the Emmens, the Graafschaps, who you're beating 3-4-0, and then just sitting in their whole half the whole time. You know, it's not going to take. It's not going to be done by the end of the season. You're not going to be done by the end of the next season, but the next 3-4 years, something definitely needs to change. Or again, there's going to be an exodus of the top young talents going to other leagues, I think.
I think it will take 3 to 5, and I think with the young talents going to other leagues as well, they've got to be aware that yes, you can have ambition, but are you going to play? I mean, you see with De Jong and De Ligt, you know, with the success of the national team now, they are not just two excellent players; they're also two very intelligent young men. And I think that the decisions that they make for their next club, I think some of us in certain quarters are going to be surprised. I don't know where they're going to go. It's far too premature in that respect. But they are two players that have so much talent and are so gifted in their respectful positions that it would be a crying shame to have those two players go on from the Netherlands and not play week in, week out, and not continue to play at the highest level in Europe.
For me, I really hope that you've seen it with the young English players going over to Germany, and you see it with Dilrosun at Hertha Berlin. That's the sort of hope I've got for, if the younger talents do leave, they go to clubs that they're going to get a chance at, and they don't go to the Manchester Cities, the Chelseas, where you just get, you know, bogged down in the reserves, and then you get sent out on loan for years and years. You saw, you know, this week Patrick Van Aanholt said that he was on the brink of quitting football because he was just sick of getting loaned out by Chelsea constantly. You know, the young players need to avoid that scenario and go to clubs where James says they have to play. You know, look at the mid-table sides in Germany, look at the mid-table sides in Italy. Go to a place where you're going to get constant first-team action, because if you're playing, then you become automatically a place for the national team if you're impressing. And that's what's happened to Dilrosun. It's what happened to these young English players in Germany. They're now getting a chance in the national team because they're playing week in, week out. They're not going to get that if they sit on a bench at Manchester City or Barcelona.
I can agree with what you're saying about the teams getting stronger and the players will want to leave. If you look more closely about how each team's performed in their league matches, some matches have been fairly straightforward for Ajax and PSV. I'm looking more at PSV, 13 wins out of 13, but narrow wins over Vitesse, who were down to 10 men at some point in the game. A narrow win over Fortuna Sittard away from home, a newly promoted team too. And these aren't the only examples throughout the season. They have won 13 out of 13, but you can hardly say that it's been straightforward. And I think had a couple of draws or defeats been within those results, we wouldn't have maybe having this conversation.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point, man. That's a very good point.
On that note, though, Gareth has asked a question on Twitter. With Ajax doing well in the Champions League and PSV possibly going out of Europe altogether, will this help PSV's title defence?
It won't harm it. I think you know, they're out of the cup as well. If they're going to go out of Europe, it seems so. With only having the title to concentrate on, you know, it's not gonna hinder the chances. They're 5 points ahead at the moment, and they've still got Champions League group games. If they've only got the league to focus on, it can only be, you know, a good thing, I guess, for Mark van Bommel going forward. And Ajax might be looking at the last 16 games and, you know, might take their eye off a couple of fixtures going into them. So yeah, I think PSV, they've been horrific in Europe, in my opinion, this season. I think they've totally changed from their Eredivisie performances to go into these Champions League games, playing a different way, less controlling, less attacking. And it's been detrimental, and they'll exit Europe with their tails between their legs this year, I think. But I think they remain favourites for the league for me, just because I think Ajax do want to go further in Europe and they might slip up a couple of times.
For me, it's a long old season, as we know only too well. I stated at the start of the season that I think Ajax will win the Eredivisie, and I'm sticking to it. Although Michael, you make some great points about PSV's fortunate win in Sittard. I think they also scraped past Pek Zwolle away from home, I believe. And I think with the energy and the demands that Van Bommel puts on his very, very young side, I think maybe that will wane towards the end of the season. I don't think that Ajax will drop many points in the second half of the season. Maybe in and around the potential Champions League last 16 clash, home and away, and also depending on who it's against, I think we might start to see a couple of results. But I think playing in the Champions League and playing well in the Champions League, as Ajax have done so far this season, I think that gives them even more confidence and even more energy to carry that good vein of form on in the Eredivisie. And I think this title will go to the wire.
So do I. And I did say Ajax at the start of the season. It's looking more likely to be PSV at the moment. And I think, to answer Gareth's question as well, I think it will make a difference if Ajax are going to go far in Europe. And I think it might act as a sort of fillip that they can continue doing well in Europe as an achievement for the season, rather than having to fight for the title, which they desperately have wanted the last 4 to 5 years. I think that instead they may take a good run in the Champions League next stages instead of a title, if it comes down to that and having to rest players and such.
The fan expectancy as well, to follow up on that point, Michael, the fans want to win the title again. Yes, they are delighted of how it's gone in the Champions League in a difficult group and playing so well, and the joy of the Benfica win in particular, and to have such a good start and to come through the qualifying rounds. But the main core of the fans, and also rumblings at board level, yes, it's going well with the youth. Yes, there are people that are happy, but they want this to culminate in a title win. And should they not win it, I'll be very interested to see what happens after that.
Yeah, very good points. Although relating to this Ajax quality of squad, one of the final questions we've had submitted to us this week is from Cam, and he would like to know who would win this current Ajax squad, or the squad that made it to the Europa League final in 2016, and why? A very good question. I think just to sort of balance this argument, consider that if it was a face-up between that Ajax then and that Ajax now, rather than Ajax getting to that Champions League final playing that same match against United, who would win a straight-up face-off between those two teams?
For me, I think it'd be the Ajax squad that they have now. I think talent-wise, it's a lot higher than the one that got to Europa League final. I think the addition of Dusan Tadic, you've got Daley Blind in the defence, Frenkie de Jong in the midfield, and Hakim Ziyech that's at the top of his game at the moment. I think all over the pitch they're strong, and I think there's a few weak points in that Ajax side that got to Europa League final, and I think now they're just stronger all over the pitch.
No, I agree with Mike. I think the current side would win. I think there's a little bit more creativity and a little bit more, I think they're more mature at European level now. You see that with them being on the verge of the Champions League last 16 and not being phased, going away to play Bayern Munich in Munich, and the way they were fortunate to win with Benfica, with the way the goal happened, but the joy that it brought, and they're more mature at European level, and so I would agree that I think the current squad would win if in a tie between those two.
Yeah, I agree too. All three of us agree that I think that the current Ajax team is better. There's more creativity. You saw in the Champions League final the Europa League final against Manchester United, that there was a bit of a lack of creativity in the middle of the park, and that's something that the likes of Frenkie de Jong would offer now. And the players that are still there are more mature, They're better on the European stage. They know how to show their qualities, and yeah, I think that will continue. Well, James and Mike, thank you very much for joining me this week, and hopefully it's not too long again before our next podcast.
You're more than welcome anytime.
Thank you.